Let's talk about the books that I have read recently. I think the last time I updated this was end of February, and now we are nearing the end of April, so I have a few more books to add to my reading challenge of 2025, and I thought I would share my thoughts, spoiler free. I actually only have one of the physical books here with me, so these are imposters. But let's go in order of what I've read. The first book I read was actually an audiobook, and yes, I count audiobooks. You're just a hater if you don't, especially when you read a lot of physical books. I'm allowed to count an audiobook, okay? And the reason it was an audiobook, not that I have to defend myself, but because I love listening to memoirs. And this specific memoir was The House of My Mother by Sherry Frankie. And if you don't know who that is, she is the oldest child of Ruby Frankie and the whole 8 Passengers YouTube family vlogger saga that went down where Ruby was arrested and is currently in prison for child abuse. So this is the oldest daughter speaking about her experience growing up online and all of the events that panned out after that. And I wanted to hear it from her voice, and it was free on Spotify Premium, so I decided to listen to it, and I got through it really fast. Oh my gosh, this was so devastating. I watched the documentary, and I've been following this case in real time, so I knew some things, but there are definitely things that you wouldn't know unless you heard the behind the scenes scoop on it, and even the documentary didn't show, which I know Sherry had some sort of an involvement working with that because she was interviewed for the documentary. But hearing all this from her own words, I just, like, my heart breaks. I don't know how anyone could support family vloggers, and maybe that's very opinionated of me to say, but after hearing this case and everything these kids went through, I just, like, cannot justify it at all, even if it seems good. And I really think Sherry is going to change the tides with this book, change the way the online world views family vlogging and how exploitative it can be of children that cannot knowingly consent and understand what they're signing up for, bargaining their childhoods away. I don't rate nonfiction books because it doesn't feel fair to rate someone based on how entertaining their story is, but it was extremely well written. I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to everyone, especially if you consume a lot of online content or have or still do consume specifically family vlogging content, which I don't really follow any of that anymore. I used to when I was younger. I didn't specifically watch 8 Passengers, but I know my sister did, and I'd like seen clips of them around. It is so crazy. I just can't imagine how many other kids are probably going through something very similar. We just don't know. And like, this was the one case that happened to get so bad that the public caught on, and the kids were brave enough to step out and do something about it because that's how bad it had gotten. So that was the first book I finished since my last reading wrap up, and then I went on to Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the new Hunger Games book. It's about Haymitch's games, so the 50th games, aka the Court of Quell. I'm gonna give my very summarized thoughts here, but I did a whole reading vlog on this book specifically a few weeks ago, right after it came out. So if you want to see spoiler review of that and my reaction throughout the book, I would recommend checking out that video because that was my genuine first reaction of reading it for the first time. And I never thought I would get to read another Hunger Games book for the first time. I ate it up. I love that there's always a deeper meaning behind what she's trying to talk about, and this book had a lot to do with propaganda and not believing everything you see. Felt like a lot of it was applicable to today's climate, but overall, so beautifully done, so devastating. I cried multiple times throughout it. I was staring at the wall for days after every time I thought about it because that is just how triggered it made me, but in a good way. I love a book that can make me cry. If you can make me cry, it's almost always a 5-star. Love that. Cannot wait for the movie to come out. Maybe we'll get another Hunger Games book in the future, but I'm not gonna set my hopes too high. I'm really all over here with genres since this last wrap up. Usually it's all fantasy, but that does not mean I didn't read any fantasy because this next book is a fantasy book, Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I grew up reading the Mortal Instruments series. It was one of those series that got me into reading when I was in elementary school, and I've reread it multiple times throughout my life, and I actually reread them a couple years ago, so that was the most recent I had reread them. And my friend who also loves them kept telling me to read the Clockwork Angel trilogy, and I just kept putting it off because it's scary to dive into. It's the same world, but it's prior to the events of the Mortal Instruments series. A trilogy is not very daunting to me. When I'm looking at a 5+ part book, that's when I start to get I don't know if I can do this. Her books are very easy reads, but I actually loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I had a really good time reading it. It didn't really take me many sittings to get through it, and it was so fun to dive into this world, another part of this world for the first time again. But I'm really excited to get into to the second and third one. The way it ended in the first one, I love. It's like has me on the edge of my seat, but I had so many new releases coming out that I was like, I'll take a break from it. And I have a hold placed at the library for the second one, so I will have to go pick that up on Monday. One of my favorite parts about it was the time period it was set in, and it's in London, so it was just so magical. I know not everyone loves this, but I love fantasy books where it's like the real world, but also there's like a hidden fantasy world within it, and that's what this whole universe is like. And let me know if I should dive into the other, is it a duology or trilogy? I can't remember, but the Lady Midnight, I think is what it's called. I've heard mixed reviews on that one. And then getting into my two new releases that I read here in April, right as they came out. The first one was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. Abby is one of my favorite romance authors, and I've literally only read, this is my third book of hers. Also, like, this is a side note, but she has some of my favorite romance covers. They're so beautiful. A nice switch up from the stereotypical, like, just a plain color with the cartoonish characters on the front, and she still has that, but I love the color scheme of it all. And that's a side note that has nothing to do with the actual book, but it did do a good job of getting the vibe correctly of what the book was about. And I went into this blind, didn't even read the synopsis on purpose, and I like to do that sometimes to keep me on my toes and keep me surprising, especially with romance books. I don't know, if I like know the synopsis, then I can better figure out what's happening, and I like to have the surprise. What I was not expecting about this book was the sadness that also came with it, but in a good way. Hear me out. There are a lot of deeper lessons learned throughout this book. Like, there's a huge plot happening outside of the romance, which is my favorite thing in a romance book. I just like can't keep myself invested if it's just solely romance. This one I really enjoyed because of that. I love the main character, like main guy interest, and I love the main girl. And honestly, the family dynamic was so fun to see. A lot of it felt realistic, not that I could relate to pretty much anything that was happening, but like I could believe that this family existed. However, what did take me out of the story, and like my one big critique of this and what was holding back from giving it a 5-star, was the fact that, and I love you, Abby, I love you, but I'm gonna be brutally honest here and say that I really wish you didn't try to be so hip in with the times in your books, because it really takes me out of it when I'm reading about Rhysand from ACOTAR 5 times, especially in the first 10 chapters. I'm like, why is this even coming up at all, let alone that many times? And I understand what she was trying to do. I don't know, like when TikTok gets brought up in books, it like cringes me out, and so does the other like current event stuff, and I feel like it dates the book even though it's current. I don't really know how to explain it, but that was the one thing that like cringed me out. And like some of the dialogue was very cringy too. Like I could see it was trying to be younger type of dialogue than it was, and you can just see right through that. That was my big critique and why I gave it 4 stars. But otherwise, I really enjoyed it. Just for the Summer is my favorite by hers, but I liked this one better than Yours Truly. I don't think Yours Truly is a bad book. I just hate miscommunication tropes, and that was another thing I really appreciated about this book. There was no miscommunication tropes and no like, I think we need to break up, or to the point where it wasn't realistic and it just made the story infuriating to read. I appreciated that. Something about Abby Jimenez is my hometown is near where she lives, so a lot of the places she talks about when it takes place in Minnesota are places I've been to, so that's fun to read. Honestly, I actually enjoy that. And then it also takes place in California, which I've only been there for a few days, and it makes me want to go back so bad and actually spend time in California. And then the last book I'm going to talk about today is the only one I have here with me because I actually finished it this morning. Fearless by Lauren Roberts. This is the final installment in the Powerless trilogy, and I've been reading each of these books as they've come out, so that's been really fun. It's fun to read along as a fantasy series is developing, even though you have to wait for each one, but she honestly got them out fast because Reckless came out less than a year ago and we already have Fearless, and this thing was thicky, so that does not mean I didn't cruise through it, because I did. I read it in a few sittings again because I was just so excited to read it, and I'm so devastated that the series is over. My favorite part about the Powerless books in general is the banter. Lauren is phenomenal about writing banter. I will say I did predict quite a few of the things that happened and here when like the little hints were dropped at the beginning, but honestly that didn't make me not enjoy it. If anything, it had me trying to figure out the other pieces of the puzzle before the characters did. I honestly really enjoyed how it ended, and it had me crying at the end. I don't know if that's because of the actual ending or because I was just sad that I'll never be able to read these books for the first time again. I have loved following them, and I will read anything Lauren puts out. I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself when I'm not waiting for another one of these books, but that's okay because I'm excited for what she's going to put out here in the future. To talk quickly about my upcoming TBR, I'm hoping to get to, I'm not going to probably get to all of these in order or anything, and this is in no specific order, but I've decided to not do these reading wrap-ups every single month because it feels like very redundant. I'll just be sporadically doing them throughout the year before I do my whole reading wrap-up of every book I read in a few sentences. I cannot talk at the very beginning of 2026 once I've gotten through the year. I would love to read The Queen of Nothing, which is the third and final book of the Cruel Prince trilogy. I read the first two the very beginning of this year on Kindle Unlimited and then went to read the third one and it wasn't on there, and my physical copies were here in North Carolina, so now that I'm with them, I would like to read that one because it's not very long and it's a very easy fantasy read. Wrap up that trilogy because I've been enjoying it. I would love to read Clockwork Prince, as I mentioned, the second book in the the trilogy. I would love to read Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I got this a couple years ago at a thrift store. It's one of my friend's books that she loves and she told me to get it, and I just haven't read it yet, but I honestly might read it next because I think I want a nice romance palette cleanser, especially after reading a long fantasy book. The other book I'm hoping to get to soon is Two Twisted Crowns, which is the second book and final book of the One Dark Window duology. I started it, I'm about 25% through, but then Sunrise on the Reaping I think released as I was reading it, so I took a break from it and just haven't gone back to it yet, but I've really enjoyed it and I loved the first one, so I need to finish that duology up too because I keep stopping in the middle of series, and that's one of my faults that I need to get better at, but I sometimes don't have like the attention span or willpower to power through an entire series all at once with no breaks in between, especially with so many new releases coming out. I would also love to read My camera is falling. I would also love to read Emily Henry's new book, Great Big Beautiful Life, and I think I'm gonna wait to actually buy it until it comes out in paperback next year. I'm hoping that either someone I know will buy it or I can get it at the library to read it in the meantime. And I keep hearing that it reads like a Taylor Jenkins Reid book, which if you don't know, she is one of my all-time favorite authors. So if that is the case, I'm really excited for it. I love romance books, but like I mentioned, I like when there's an actual plot outside of the romance as well. And I've heard great things regarding that in terms of this new book. When I'm recording this, I think it comes out in a couple days. So I'll have to figure out how I can get my hands on that. I post videos every Friday, so make sure you stay tuned for next week. I am so thankful that you're here. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.